Most of what we believe about ourselves was learned, was conditioned, was absorbed, was something that we picked up. This is so present for me. It's something that I do feel like I'm here to share and teach because I'm sure you've had that experience where something just keeps coming up and around, or that reticular activator when you just see something again and again and again. And I've just come to know that it's just a message. It's like the universe tapping on your shoulder. But I want to talk a little bit about this. I just finished a yoga class with my mentor, who I still practice with online. She lives in Lanai, but she's the person I finished my professional yoga teacher training with over 10 years ago. And I had this just like this awareness come through in the midst of the practice. So I thought, well, if I can make my little mushroom coffee and sit down and share a little bit, I thought that I would. I was listening to a podcast episode yesterday between a really well known woman in the online space, and she was interviewing another woman who just had like a really, really big launch. And something that was said, it was a really interesting conversation, and they were sharing a lot of great, I feel like, interesting information about the process. And the interviewer was really focused on learning more about her mindset and how she got to this place. And I think maybe there was like some thoughts that what she created, she had like over a double digit multi-million dollar launch. And the woman is selling something having to do with AI, teaching AI. I didn't, all the details don't really matter for what I wanted to share. And there was something that was said in the interview that had me like talk out loud to the screen. And I do feel like this is part of what is really coming to the surface right now in the world for women. This is really directed for more for women, but it's just something I think that is universal. And I'm going to share with you briefly that stimulus, what happened, what was shared, and then I want to talk a little bit about this and how I'm experiencing it and how you might be experiencing it. Yeah, because I just feel like we cannot have enough voices in the room for sure sharing what is attempting to be expressed, because I think we all have a purpose and a mission and a message to share here in this world. So I'm going to paraphrase, but what was shared was they were breaking the differences between men and women, and the woman being interviewed was sharing it like, well, I'm just going to break it in the masculine and the feminine. And one of the things that she was talking about, and again, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, she was sharing that some of the one of the companies did a study and said like 27% of women still feel that AI is cheating. And then she started talking about her experience with how she's experiencing men versus women engaging with, I think, her tool or her course or the whatever it is. And she might have been blending in some of what she found online as well. But she started talking about it as the masculine and the feminine. And that really kind of it triggered me, but it just kind of sparked something in me that I wanted, that I really believe was just speaking to this thing that I said in the very beginning. And that is that most of what we believe about ourselves was learned, was absorbed, was conditioned, including almost all of the expressions of what does it mean to be born in a body with female parts and what does it mean to be born in a body with male parts. I know there are differences internally. I'm not a scientist. There are differences internally as it relates to how all that functions and how that works inside of our bodies. And I would also offer that a lot of how then we experience it is been influenced and filtered through everything we've learned here, which are a lot of constructs on what a woman is supposed to be and what a man is supposed to be. What are the expressions of a man? What are the expressions of a woman? And when you bring in the masculine and feminine, this is the part that I felt like she was she either had wrong or was misunderstanding, or I just have a difference of opinion, which is fine. And that is, she was expressing it. The feminine is experiencing it this way, and the masculine is experiencing it this way. And in my experience, when she was speaking to the feminine, she was actually sharing very masculine traits. They were not feminine traits. They were masculine traits coming through women that she was now describing as feminine. And so let me just pause there for a moment because I want to make sure. I tend to think and speak in association. But really, the heart of what inspired me to get on was just to drop in here and start testing more unscripted videos and sharing when I'm in the moment and not getting too caught up. Because as a 54-year-old woman, a Gen X woman, a mixed race woman, a woman who grew up with financial insecurity, a woman who grew up with a lot of friends that had stuff that she never had, like I'm just sharing that as like part of what created my personal reality, which then was my personality per se. I have had a tendency to definitely overthink, overproduce, overcreate, overcompensate, over-responsible. This is very common for Gen X women. It's very common for women over 40. It's very common for that generation that came in, at least for Gen X, it was the latchkey kid where you were kind of on your own. You kind of had to become an adult or have adult responsibilities when you were like 7, 8, 9 years old, coming home from school, making your own snacks. You had your own key. No one was there to greet you. And then also just what was going on in the world. This is also initiating before internet and all these things. And then there is just the dynamic that happens between that I'm sure was more so birthed in the workspace, in the space of where women wanted to start participating in producing and contributing and making money. But because we were never equalized, we found that the human will adapt and find powerful ways to, learn, be successful, whatever that is. And so women have definitely adapted and adopted practices and habits of over everything, overcompensating. Like it's just the energy that women have had to take on and embody just to try to get in the room or sit at the table or have an experience of feeling heard or valued is just that in itself is not only toxic but will create burnout. And when I was hearing, I want to share a little bit here. I want to talk about this because I want to share a little bit how I'm experiencing it and what I know I'm bumping up against as a woman who spent almost 30 years inside organizations and have for the last 3 years been building, but also really challenged in that building because I was taking care of both my parents and then my mom suddenly passed away. I was laid off, so it wasn't my choice, but it was a blessing, and I knew it when I was told it. But trying to get a job at this stage of life is definitely not it. That in itself can be also really dehumanizing and demoralizing. You have to have a really strong constitution. I mean, now the job market is like on its head. And even though I think it's really, really, really harming a lot of people, I also feel like there's something happening here in the workplace, like it's going to be recreated and rebirthed because these younger generations are they just, they're creating something different and they're a generation, right? So they're going to create different realities, different value systems. That's going to change. I mean, already where they spend their money, their time, their attention, which is very valuable. But right now, a lot of the wealth is in the Gen X generation. And a lot of the wealth is going to be managed and owned and basically received by Gen X women because when boomers pass, there's this great wealth transfer that's happening. And so I'm getting a little bit off track, but what I'm trying to share is that we're in the midst of something it's like this, so many things are shifting. And I was paused when I heard this woman talking about feminine and masculine because I don't think she was accurate. Like women holding back, women doing, I can't remember now what she was saying that would have been helpful, but what she was describing that women were doing were actually more masculine or masculine absorbed ways expressed through a woman to try to be a part of this, because producing and competing and all of that is very masculine energy. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we all have the capacity to do and be both. And because we've put everything in boxes is why it's so difficult for us to really value it and understand it and accept that it's not a man that has an awareness or experience of his own feminine is not a weaker man. As a matter of fact, I think a man that has an experience of his feminine and also of his masculine is probably one of the strongest energetics and healing energetics of our world, because of how much power men are given in our society even to date. But I wanted to talk about, just for a minute, these, how much of us is learned, and what we think is true about ourselves is not true. It's an experience. It's literally an experience that we picked up, that we decided was true, that we believe about ourselves, about everything. So much of what we believe about everything was made up. Excuse me. And what I mean by that is, I won't get too far down a rabbit hole on this because I do have other videos about this, and I will be talking more and more about this because I just obviously can't stop. And that is that our brains are meaning making machines. And there's a lot of scientific research about this. So this is not something that I'm hypothesizing for the first time. This is just the way that I express it. And it's helped me understand more a lifetime of what I felt was like living in low grade depression, and then became anxiety about 15 years ago. I never experienced anxiety before that, because I felt like my mom was like a worrier and somebody that seemed to have that kind of low grade because she was so strong and, you know, didn't her generation didn't show a lot of that deeper stuff. So she was really controlled, but I felt it. I didn't start having that until 2010. And that was just a huge shift in my life. So my point though is that I've been trying to find answers for so long, and this has just been part of my path, this kind of unlearning, but also first trying to understand. And that's what I come back to, is like, our brains are meaning making machines, because we're always trying to understand. Because when we feel like we understand, then we feel like we're a part, or we're participating, or maybe it's sometimes translated as like, I'm okay, I'm safe, I belong. When you're a child, when you're a baby, I mean, babies hear the word no more than anything, because they're always trying to assert their agency. We're at that stage, it's like, it's a very natural primal thing to just try to like see that thing, touch that thing, go over there, play in that, whatever it is, because it's like everything is brand new, right? And everything is definitely not yours. When you're a baby, it's like you're, and rightfully so, to be protected. But I can, if we could just like, if we had like a memory of what it was like, I'm sure it would be so profoundly interesting. But babies, from our, even inside the womb, infancy, toddler, adolescent, and so on, and up until probably we stop really functioning, fully functioning, we're always trying to understand. The brain is trying to help us understand. So we know that when we don't know everything, we don't have we'll fill it in. We'll make stuff up. And so in a way, society is literally like an accumulation of like this being happening for centuries. And then we pick up also our familial and our lineage and our consciously and unconsciously. A lot of this is unconscious. But before I get down that path, and I don't think I need to share all that in this video, I just wanted to share this piece around so much of who you are, who you believe you are, was learned. It was made up. It was absorbed. So everything from what you thought success was supposed to be, and that you might be judging yourself against, how you, as a woman, how you adapted and adopted ways of being. Like, I'll share one personal example that might give this a little bit more texture, but when, I was very ambitious growing up, and I know now it was because I really just wanted to create a different financial experience than what I grew up in. I grew up in what was felt like scarcity energy. There was never enough. Turn the lights off. Like everything was like, you know, was about, it felt like restriction and not enoughness and money and bills. And my mom was a single mom for the most part. My parents were married for 10 or 11 years. My father was a traveling musician, so he was hardly ever home. She was running everything on her own. And then when they separated, she was pretty much living on one income. And she didn't have formal education. And so she eventually landed in a company and retired there. And I think that was really wonderful for her to have that stability. But that mindset never shifted. I mean, I felt that until towards the end of her life, where she was still making decisions that I wish she had made different ones for herself, but they were based on her perception of what was real, what was practical. And that exists, but even that is all made up. I mean, we have plenty of case studies of people doing all kinds of stuff that don't necessarily, that are the offshoot of the groupthink. So when I um, when I had that experience of anxiety, that was the beginning of my inner life breaking down. And I know now it had a lot to do with the fact that the career as I knew it and as I was building all these years, that really, I wouldn't say came easy to me because it was really, really hard work, but I wasn't always searching for a new job. I was being invited because when you work in an industry like fashion retail, it's about the hustle and the grind and about the commitment. And I love learning. And so I was just in it, I mean, it was my life. I did not get to have children. And when I had that experience where I started having anxiety, I believe everything is really happening for and through us. But at the time, it just felt, I mean, it was after the stock market crash in 2010, and I found myself in San Diego working for Sony. And I really didn't want to leave New York. That's where I had been beforehand for a startup retailer that had closed. So when that started happening, that situation, I was so out of my depth, like in many, many ways, like working in an electronic company. I chose to go there because I studied Japanese in college. That's a whole other interesting story. I studied Japanese in college, and I'm going to cross my other leg. And I lived in Japan for a year teaching English through the JET program. So the opportunity to have another experience with a Japanese company was really interesting to me, but selling electronics was not. And it was it was a really powerful experience because I was able to take my expertise. That's what they hired us for. They were building a retail concept store. But it just was, it was out of my depth. I was out of my depth internally because of maybe not honoring that I wanted to stay in New York. I was out of my depth because it was a different field, and even though I was hired for my expertise and I used it, I was in a different industry that was much more complex. Sony is a very, very complex company. They have a gazillion products, which I think is part of the challenge, but they've been around for a long time. And then I absorbed a team, and I had 11 people working for me, and only one person did I actually hire. And they were pretty much not really loyal to me. And there was definitely some stuff going on with some of the women there that I realize now is really just not cool with me. And I'm sure I was not perfect, but it was all part of thrusting me out of that life as I knew it. So I'm sharing all that to say that, like, I realized from that when my life started breaking up, and eventually found myself after a couple years with other things happening back in Los Angeles. Now I'm working in a nonprofit. I'm making half the salary on purpose, like just to kind of remove myself. But what I ended up getting deeper into my yoga journey and then yoga teacher training. And I share that because it wasn't until I did my teacher training, yoga teacher training, that I experienced a different nervous system that I could inhabit. And I was not plugged into the world as most of us know it, in a career, in an organization, working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, pumping away. I wasn't doing that. I was in a different setting. For a while, I actually also took time off trying to build a business back then. And that had a lot of anxiety and fear and stuff in it. But I had now an experiential reference point of a tone, a tonality, an inner tonality that was not the grind. And that's when I started to experience more of my own feminine. I'm a very feminine woman, but my energy has been very driven and ambitious. That's very masculine. So a lot of these things that this woman was speaking to, a lot of them that she was saying were feminine that she's experiencing through women, they're not feminine. They're masculine ways of being coming through a woman. And the reason why I felt kind of triggered and inspired to share this is that misunderstanding in itself is what is keeping women in many ways locked in because, well, first on a practical level, no one's going to come and fix it and change it. Like that, the reality of that isn't going to be changed by anybody but us. But really, it's about that way of being that you've created to participate, to succeed, to have that experience. You've had to step outside more of what's not as natural for you. So I do feel like I have more of that ambitious driven energy, which is a more masculine trait. But because we're not taught all this stuff and we don't really understand it, and then there is a lot of misunderstandings about it, case in point, we're not thinking about it. We're just living, and we're all kind of living in these adapted lives trying to succeed. And that's partially the challenge, right? Because we have this unconscious idea, or we might even have a conscious idea of what success is for us. But I would offer that more than half of us, if not the majority of us, were never actually sat down with, even with ourselves or from anybody that was loving us, mentoring us, caring for us, raising us. Like, what do you really want? What do you care about? So you build an entire life around an identity that was actually created because of the groupthink, because of what you were told, because of what helped you feel like you belong. So this masculine and feminine piece, I feel like is so important to just share. And also what the heart of this video is also like where I know I'm struggling in it. I know that. And I feel grateful that I'm aware of it and that I can work with it. But the thing that I realize I haven't said, this is where I talk in association, so thank you for staying with me, is that we make ourselves wrong. Women, because we are the caretakers mentally, emotionally, and physically, because we are the ones who birth children and who care and have also been conditioned to be that emotional sponge and support for everyone, not just in your family, right? Because there's all kinds of layers in family, the one you create, the one you come from, the ones you join, but also in the workplace. Like there's just an expectation of what women do and what men do. Men lift and build things, women, cook food and nurture or whatever that is. And not that everyone's doing that exactly, but that is pretty much the construct that we were all born into. So what happens in that is that if you find yourself not only not having the results you want, or not getting seen the way you want, or you want to do something different, all of that is filtered through a lens of the way I am is not okay. There's something wrong with me. I did something wrong. And that judgment will not only keep you trapped, but it's just so daunting and it's not true. Meaning, like, that way, if you identify with any of those things that I shared, you learned that here. That's not who you are. That's not who we are. That's what we learned. So case in point, I feel like I'm somebody who's way more comfortable of being vulnerable than a lot of people, and definitely a lot of women. And yet I'm still seeing how insidious my protections of self are. Like even what I did just to set this up, that I just wanted to be a really organic video. It's like I don't yet know how to just turn on the camera and start talking and not care about the environment. And I'm not judging that as right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, all of that is conditioning, it's learned, and it's effort, it's energy. So, how do I wrap this up? And how do I share a little, or maybe I don't, but I do feel like I need to say one more thing. Coming back to what I heard, women are burnt out not just because of the sheer labor and the opportunities that exist in every workforce because of how many things were built and quietly and overtly in ways that don't really support humans in general. Like even the 40-hour work week. Why do we need to stay stuck to that? None of us, most people don't work only 40 hours anyhow. And with the way the world is and how much we're on the receiving end and the internet, I mean, what humans need is different than they needed back then. I mean, and then some. But also, what women have had to do to participate, and also often then putting all that energy into roles and experiences that are not only set up for you, they're not supporting you, they don't really honor you or value you. But I would offer in so many ways, they're probably not things you actually want to be doing anyhow, but you don't even know it. And there might be parts of it. Like the last role I was in was probably the first job where almost everything that I was assigned to do as part of my role, which was director of organizational development, I was so excited about. I mean, honestly, I'm used to like being like maybe 50% of my job is what I love. That's awesome, right? Because you always got to do stuff. I wasn't managing a team at first. I eventually built a small team. I wasn't managing a team at first. And I love leading others. And I'm not really somebody who likes to work alone. But managing people is a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work. So if you're doing that and actually what you're doing every day is not what you want, that's an opportunity. But on top of that, if you've been doing it for 10, 20 plus years and you haven't built an expression of your own heart, you haven't spent time seeing what wants to come through you, that's the burnout. All of that will make it impossible. It's like when you're not aligned, and then the more life we have, the more we become aware. And a lot of it is still unconscious because not because you don't get it. It's because we were not born into worlds that are teaching us about this piece of being a human being. They're not teaching us about what's happening on the inside, our inner operating system. They're not teaching us how we become who we are. They're not teaching us about our physiology, our biology, and our psychology, and how all of those things are basically tools and ways of understanding what's happening on the inside so that we can become uniquely aware and in conscious leadership of our individual expression of it. We're not taught any of that. So that's why I think it comes through things like a layoff or where we are so burnt out, we have to eject ourselves. We get in that situation and we're probably feeling like so beaten down, and however you might think about that. And that is the gift. That is the gift, because it's like I could not reach you any other way. And I'm offering, it's because we weren't trained, we weren't taught, we weren't educated on any of that. So we won't see other signs, we won't honor them. And the world is not designed for women, to value women, to equalize women, to see what how incredible women actually really are and how much we are doing to maintain this society. So that could take me down a high horse. I'm not going to do that. But I want this to be an inspiration to myself and to you, because I know that I'm in my own layer of that right now, where the propensity to do something a certain way, which is not getting me the result that I want, is conditioning. And in order for me to create something different, I literally have that. This could make me cry. I'm not going to cry, but it could. I literally have to consciously go, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try this, which feels so scary and uncomfortable. Like this, versions of this. Like not quaffing myself and not even looking in the mirror and knowing what I look like, or sharing more about myself because of the idea of, after all this time, I should be able to create success wherever I go. Because, by the way, that was my experience for many years. So this is an education on masculine and feminine, and I don't have something I could offer you in that right now. I have tools, but I don't have something I could share right now. And I don't want to hold this video from being shared, but I want you to understand. I want to be able to be that voice that just says to you that wherever you feel dis-ease, wherever you feel struggle, I'm offering that there's growth there, and not always in the obvious way. It's not like, oh yeah. No, it's like there's something to learn there around, oh, that way of being is an adapted style that I learned because that's what the society I was born into was requiring of me. It's not my fault. It's not a character defect. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need a diagnosis. I need to just become learned that that is a part of that reality, and it's not who I am. Our traits, your behaviors, your choices, your mistakes, it's not who you are. It's just part of your learning experience and your unfolding. But if you're listening to this, that means you are awake, wanting to be awake. And I'm offering for your consideration that a lot of what's going to block you, and it's blocking me, and it blocks humans, because we are embodied and we have these egos that are wanting to run our lives, are these things that we are not educated on. So if you are thinking that AI is cheating, it's because you learned in a masculine world that you had to overcompensate to get in the door. And that overcompensating is not feminine, it's masculine. The push, the prove, that's not feminine. The feminine energy in us is a receiver. She receives. She births. She's the moon. She's not the sun in the, like, that's not feminine, that's masculine. So if you are holding this idea that using AI is cheating, it's because you were taught by experience over decades that you have to do more to even get an inch. That's not feminine, and that's not something that you created, and that's not a problem with you. That is a challenge in the society in which we were born into. And I do think our soul chose to come here. I don't think we're victims. But being asleep to all that will have us living an entire life, like making ourselves wrong, not being able to live into our life's fullest expression and potential, and struggling. And it's so much more arduous that way. So I hope that landed. I hope that makes sense. I would love any thoughts, questions, reflections. I'm learning too. So please know that I am on this journey with you. And if you're new to me, my name is Jennifer, and I try to be here every day to remind you that your truth is your power. So trust yourself and watch your life unfold. Until next time.